The United States government recently launched us into another quagmire war in the Middle East. Another regime change fiasco. Except you're not supposed to call it regime change. So shh, don't say the words. According to Hegseth, it's not a regime change at all, but also, quote, the regime sure did change. Trump said we're both completely done with the war and that it's just beginning. So I guess it's safe to say that this is Schrodinger's regime change. The strikes against Iran are being called Operation Epic Fury. I can only imagine it was named that by the same teenage edgelords in the administration who are constantly shitposting on the official US government social media accounts these days. According to a leaked memo, we might be at this for another 7 months at least. So that gives us a pretty good reason to get acquainted with what's behind what we're doing in Iran and what in the ever-loving shit buckets led us to the point where we're embroiled in a war in the Middle East. Again. We have a narrative about Iran here in the US. I'm not going to say that it's not true, or at least not completely, but it's definitely designed to serve a specific purpose. Iran is actually one of the oldest human-inhabited regions on Earth, and we have evidence that people showed up there at least 100,000 years ago. This is a region with a long, complicated history touched by multiple empires and peoples, languages, and cultures, from Timur to Alexander the Great to Cyrus and Darius, and everyone's favorite George Santos drag persona, Xerxes. Despite the right-wing messaging trying to equate this to other geopolitical disagreements, no one is saying that the Islamic Republic of Iran should have no consequences for bad behavior. And the same people who make you feel crazy for thinking Operation Epic Fury was a bad idea are also the same people who yell at you for pointing out that one of the things we just did was send a Tomahawk missile straight into the roof of an elementary school. What I want to talk about is how we got here. In the modern period, Iran is a one-dimensional, ever-present boogeyman. It's a useful tool. Always dangerous, always nefarious, but never quite dangerous enough to do anything about. All that goes away if you actually take action and wipe the potentiality of Iran off the board. And that's exactly what Trump just did, and why he finds himself in such a predicament by dragging us into Schrodinger's war, where it's both finished and never-ending. This is a war that's costing $1 billion a day. There are constant headlines now about how our stockpiles of missiles are running low because of the chaotic and non-existent logistics and planning. I do find the videos very funny that are just counting the dollars as the missiles are fired off. Some of them are pointing out at various intervals like, oh yeah, this much would pay for universal healthcare, and this much would pay for student debt relief, and this is homelessness eliminated. The other thing I think is really striking is when we put this whole thing up against a direct comparison. Do you guys remember, like, the last time we did this? Because I remember Donald Rumsfeld pointing at a diagram of a tractor-trailer supposedly carrying WMDs and giving us at least a fantasy about how Iraq was constructing and transporting dirty bombs. It was pretty hilarious looking back because they're all like, well, the only reason we can't find them is because they're just always using these trucks to keep them on the move. And I was like, well, if you can't find them, how do you know they're there? But yeah, you know, people fell for that. And there's really no reason that we're bombing Iran right now, and no real justification like the coordinated messaging that came out of the Bush administration that they were pushing that got us into Iraq, but still somehow people are falling for this. Instead, what we have are 30 years of speeches by Benjamin Netanyahu warning us that Iran is weeks away from developing a nuclear bomb. It's just weeks away, everybody. We've been weeks away for 30 years. Someone compiled a time-lapse of those speeches, and I do highly recommend checking that out because it's very amusing. It feels very much like they're stuck now. They're just all lost in their shoes that all strangely don't fit for some reason. Like, have you seen this now? What is wrong with these people? Trump bought them all shoes by just guessing their shoe size, and of course they're all scared little kids, so they can't not wear them, and they just look like absolute buffoons. They're all so weird in just the weirdest possible ways, but also dangerous, because as easy as it is to mock them for being completely off the rails carnival outcasts, they follow through on the threats of violence against US citizens who criticize them. Even veterans like this Marine veteran whose arm was broken by a literal senator for showing up to protest in the middle of a Senate hearing. As always, when Trump does literally anything, you have to stop for about a half a second and say to yourself, okay, what's in it for him? Because Trump campaigned on ending wars. He yelled, no new wars over and over and over. This was a major point drummed up in the media through countless articles and analysis. Kamala Harris was supposed to be the pro-war president and continue the endless wars that neoliberal American hegemony demanded. Trump went so far as to demand the Nobel Peace Prize to be awarded to him, again because Obama won it and he wanted to upstage him like he always does. And then he pressured the woman who actually won the prize to visit him and bullied her into handing it over to him, like physically giving him the prize. But not before FIFA, the soccer organization, inexplicably just made up their own peace prize and gave it to Trump. Trump created an entire organization that he calls the Board of Peace, which is an extra-legal, apparently non-US entity or one beholden to any international laws at all, where he has designated himself the permanent chairman. And each of the participating countries have to pay $1 billion in membership dues. It's kind of unclear where that money goes. The board was supposed to be established as a mechanism to establish peace in Gaza and rebuild its infrastructure, but the word Gaza never actually appears in the organization's charter. And Trump has now committed $10 billion to the Board of Peace from US coffers, even though he doesn't have the authority to do that. Not surprising anyone, the actual goal of the Board of Peace is probably just to make a ton of money in real estate development in Gaza, which is exactly what Trump told us he wanted to do. According to billionaire member of the Board of Peace, Yakir Gabe, the Gaza coastline is 26 miles long. It can be developed as a new Mediterranean Riviera with 200 hotels and potential islands. Trump has said that the Board of Peace was created in order to establish a real international peacekeeping organization because we've been lacking that in the world, which led a lot of people to the immediate conclusion that he just made this up in order to set up a competitive organization to the United Nations, which is already exactly what he claims that he wants. But then, surprising no one, he won and stole all these peace prizes and then made his Board of Peace and then turned around and immediately started another war. He told us over and over again that he was the peace president, that he'd inexplicably ended 8 wars, 10 wars that no one could identify in countries he struggled to even pronounce. Now we have at least some rumblings about the draft being reinstated. Board of Peace indeed. And just as one Reddit user said in a comment I found recently, it's like the FIFA Peace Prize means nothing these days. Of course, one of the most insane things about this is that Trump promised over and over again that he'd lower gas prices. And yet during the initial strikes on Tehran, we blew up a major oil depot, the aftermath of which went completely viral on social media. Not only that, but it's being reported that Trump and Hegseth had no plan at all for controlling the corridor where 1/5 of the world's oil passes through, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And Iranian forces have now blockaded the strait. And they've started blowing up oil tankers moving through it and booby-trapped it with mines. The price of oil, meanwhile, is skyrocketing. Four-dimensional chess, this is not. This is, as usual, Trump tipping over the board and chewing on the pieces because he thinks they're crayons. I don't know what's going to happen from here. Trump and Hegseth don't know what's going to happen from here. They have abused American military supremacy to unleash something that they cannot control and cannot predict. And I feel that, unfortunately, we're going to need to be a bit on edge for a while. I hope I'm wrong. Stick around for updates on this and more, and subscribe to the channel so you can see more of these deep dives into the important issues of our time as they come out. Stay safe out there. Make sure to vote in the midterms, whatever obstacles they might throw at us. And in the meantime, let's do some f***ing good wherever we each individually can in the world, in our own little spheres of influence. If you're interested in more military history talk, maybe check out this video I did about the time that billionaires with last names you'll absolutely recognize tried to overthrow FDR and install a puppet president, General Smedley Butler, in a sordid episode of American history known as the Business Plot. I'll see you next time, everybody. May the Board of Peace be with you. And if you happen to send me $1 billion on my Patreon, I'll make sure that it is with you, and that you can be the permanent chairman of my heart.